San Francisco. You're watching the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Coming up on today's show, yes, the NFL draft is around the corner, but there are some appealing names still left on the NFL free agency market. So we're going to take a look at the top free agents who are available, who the 49ers can still sign. And up to this point, I am not sold on the fact that Nate Sudfeld is going to back up Trey Lance in 2022. Now, obviously, we're not sure what's going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo, if he's going to get traded, if he's going to get cut, or if he's going to restructure that contract to come back as Trey Lance's backup. But there are some top available quarterbacks who might fill the void if you don't believe, and the Niners don't believe, that Nate Sudfeld is the guy to back up an inexperienced quarterback in Trey Lance. So if that's the case, here are the top backup quarterbacks right now on the free agency market that I think are the top 5 guys. Cam Newton, Ryan Fitzpatrick, A.J. McCarron, Josh Rosen. That experiment last year in training camp in the preseason for the Niners wasn't great, but this is certainly a thin list in terms of depth, as well as Nathan Peterman. Now with Cam Newton, the completion percentage always concerns me, but as a guy who has mobility, as a guy who has swagger, who has accomplished some great things, 2015 MVP season, he'd be a decent leader aside from Trey Lance. Interested to see what the money demands would be there, but Cam Newton would intrigue me just a tad, especially with short yardage situations, if you don't want to expose Trey Lance to getting beat up physically. Are you convinced that Nate Sudfeld will be Trey Lance's backup? I'm not, even though there were some financial details in that contract that he signed. And Kyle Shanahan, he's spoken glowingly of Sudfeld before. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. We shift to the top available running backs. Why running backs, Chase? When the Niners have Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, JaMycal Hasty, they brought back Jeff Wilson as well. Top available running backs because the Niners have had a lot of visits so far with running backs. So I think they could target a running back or two throughout the NFL draft, but the board doesn't fall their way. Here are the top available guys in the backfield. Melvin Gordon, Jerick McKinnon. Maybe he comes back to the Bay. I highly doubt it, although he bounced back after a couple of injury-plagued seasons with the Niners to have a good year with KC last year. Caleb Huntley, Latavius Murray, and Tarik Cohen. Now, if you were to ask me, I'm not paying old, washed-up, mileage-heavy running backs. I'm targeting them in the NFL draft because they're fresher, they don't have as much wear on the tires, and they're probably cheaper in a lot of instances as compared to some of these marquee veterans. Top available wide receivers, some star power here. And in terms of roster fit, I wouldn't hate any of these guys. Odell Beckham Jr., after that trade from the Cleveland Browns, he was great with the Los Angeles Rams. Do I think that he can be a bona fide number one week in and week out? No. Were there flashes of him being a number one capable wide receiver last year with LA? Yes. He's coming off a second torn ACL, so obviously that's a concern. But here's the beauty of the situation for San Francisco. Odell Beckham Jr. can line up anywhere on the field, and he wouldn't have to be a number one, and I think he'd be a good complementary piece next to Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, as well as George Kittle. For DeSean Jackson, if you want a vertical threat, he can still stretch the field vertically and run with the best of them. A.J. Green, if you want a big-bodied wide receiver, but the lack of production and injuries concern me a little bit. If you want a sure-handed slot receiver, Cole Beasley still available. And Emmanuel Sanders has had a long and illustrious NFL career. Nice little stint there with San Francisco back in 2019 in that Super Bowl season, but he too adds route running ability and diversity and a guy who can take the top off of the defense. I want to ask you another question here, Niner Gang, and I really do value your responses as always. Do the Niners need to sign or draft a wide receiver? Type S for sign or type D for draft. And every single selection that the Niners make in the draft, we'll do a scouting evaluation breakdown. Any signing that they make, we'll also break that down as well. That's why you subscribe to the 49ers Report by Chat Sports. Free videos every day, and on multiple cases, multiple videos per day, and we're closing in on 60,000 subs, less than 2,000 people away. Subscribe if you love the Niners, and if you want free Niners YouTube content. Top free agent tight end. The only guy that really appealed me on this list, Rob Gronkowski. But I think if anything, he goes back to Tampa to play with the Buccaneers to team up with Tom Brady. Honestly, he missed a lot of time last year, yet still 55 catches, 802 yards, and 6 touchdowns. A red zone threat who would immediately be the best backup tight end to George Kittle in the history of the league. Maybe the best backup tight end ever. But I think he's going to go back to Tampa Bay if he goes anywhere. Top available offensive tackle. Let's just say that Mike McGlinchey has a setback with that torn quad. He looked really, really light in a recent picture. Then he showed a video of him bulked up just a bit. That's a really severe injury, though, and there can be setbacks with a torn quad. Dwayne Brown, the best tackle available. He's 37 years old, but he's really, really good, even still, with him being at that age. But 6'4", 315, he can play if you need him to maybe just make a couple of starts, or in an emergency situation in which McGlinchey couldn't play, you sign Dwayne Brown to a short-term deal, worth little money. Top available center. This is really important here, folks, because there is no guarantee that Alex Mack is going to return to the Niners in 2022 for what I believe is his 14th season in the National Football League. Now, there could be some good centers falling to the Niners at pick number 61. If Alex Mack does want to return to the field for yet another year, he'll be the starting center, and maybe the Niners wouldn't have to draft a guy until later on. Or maybe they go the free agency route with J.C. Tretter, who is a really, really good center. In 2021, overall grade of nearly 79. That was 6 out of 39 centers. He's still available on the free agency market, and I think he's trying to go to a destination where he knows he can win, and the Niners certainly fit that bill. Today's show presented to you by our sportsbook partner, BetUS. NBA playoffs going on right now. Some really intriguing NFL future bets. Get those bets in by plugging in that link down below, chatsports.com/49bet, and enter the promo code Niners125 for a 125% deposit bonus. You put in $100, you get $125 back. It's a great time of the year to lay some bets down. Do so and be bold about it, and use our sportsbook partner, BetUS. Couple of position groups left. Top available defensive linemen. There are some really good pass rushers here. Now, the Niners have addressed the defensive line all throughout free agency and all throughout this offseason with not necessarily splash hires and signings, but really quality players who are good complementary pieces who could flourish with some development under defensive line coach Chris Kocurek, as well as defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans. Jason Pierre-Paul, Jadeveon Clowney, Larry Ogunjobi at the defensive tackle spot. He failed his physical after he had originally signed that big deal with the Chicago Bears. Akeem Hicks, maybe he's just a 1 or 2 down player at this point, but I wouldn't hate it for a depth signing. If Javon Kinlaw has another setback coming off that torn ACL, although throughout this offseason, he's looked damn good in his rehabilitation process. And Ndamukong Suh, still available on the free agency market. Maybe he latches on with a Super Bowl contender. He can still play. So too can all of these guys, especially when they're on this loaded defensive line where a lot of the focus will be on Nick Bosa, allowing a lot of pass rushing and run stopping opportunities for these Cats. Grade the Niners defensive line from 1 to 32. 32 teams in the National Football League. Last year, Niners defensive line was one of the best. It was certainly top 3 to 5. Where do you think they are right now, given some of the signings throughout the offseason? Let me know in the comment section. Lastly, top available defensive backs. Out of all of these players, of course I'm most interested in Tyrann Mathieu, but there hasn't been any linked interest between San Francisco and the Honey Badger. Really on that front, it's been the New Orleans Saints and it's been the Philadelphia Eagles. But right now, I'm actually surprised that Mathieu hasn't signed anywhere. This is a do-it-all player who can play cornerback, outside, inside. He can play linebacker, he can play defensive back, and he can rush the passer. Landon Collins, I think, is a little washed. He's an old-school safety that I think can get burned in nowadays pass-happy NFL. Joe Hayden for cornerback depth on a cheap deal. I think it'd be better than Jason Verrett just because of the injury history. The same can be said for Kyle Fuller. But if Jason Verrett is cool coming off his multiple ACL surgeries, maybe you bring him back on a one-year deal worth like $1 million to compete for a depth role. Which player do you want the Niners to sign? It can be the plethora of players who we just talked about on today's show. It can be a different player out there. Either way, you let me know. And thanks so much for watching the 49ers Report.